And each week we focus on the Asheville theater scene, as well as positive news about organizations and groups in the Asheville area. And toward that end, it's my pleasure to introduce my first guests, and they are George Pappas, and it's Tay, trying to get the last name, Tay Brown, and Itzayana Gomez Axencio. Is that it?
Yes.
Okay, great. And you can also wave, I think we're on now, Facebook Live. You can wave to all your fans on Facebook. Everybody's watching you. And welcome aboard, guys. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I'm especially glad to have our first guest because they are, and correct me the pronunciation, George, but they are members of the, how do you pronounce it? The name of the troop is Web,
Oh, that's Pack 607.
and it's the Web, it's Web, is there a name to the?
It's a Cub Scout pack, and they have Cub Scouts and Webelos, and they're part of the same unit. And that's part of the scouting movement. And the ages usually go from about 6 to almost 11.
And that's the term, so Weeblo is what?
Webelo is a constituent den within the Cub Scout pack. And the Webelos are the older Cub Scouts, and eventually they'll graduate into what we call the Boy Scouts.
Gotcha. And so we should mention that George, in particular, is the founder, committee member, and Weeblo's den leader. He's also an attorney at law in his spare time. And so if he has to run off to grab a call, you're
Thank you.
excused. He might have to. But George is also an author. He does a lot of other neat stuff. Itzayana is a Weeblo's Cub Scout with Pack 607 in Hendersonville. She is, she'll be crossing over. She'll eventually be joining the older Scout group.
Yes.
Okay, great. And the girls are now, which is kind of neat, girls are officially now members of the Boy Scouts of America. And so thank you for coming on board. And Tay, I don't have your background, so I'll let you give the Reader's Digest summary of your background. Your background is what?
My name is Tay Brown. I'm a Hendersonville native. For the most part, moved there when I was 2 years old. I attended school there. I worked at the Boys and Girls Club of Henderson County for about 9 years. After that, I went off to UNC Chapel Hill. I graduated with a degree in global studies. I came back to Hendersonville. I started working in the Henderson County Public School Systems, and now my current position as the Henderson County Public School System is with the Migrant Education Program as a support specialist.
Okay, super. And you're now involved in the Scout troop, is that correct?
Yes, I'm the Cub Scout Master, and so I get to oversee one of our den groups, which is the Bears. It's the age group right below George's Weeblo's den group, and it's been a great time, especially just working with all these kids in the bilingual families that come into our group.
Now, had you been a Scout when you were a kid?
No, it was actually several months before I joined Scouts. I prayed, and I tried to get some resources and tried to just say I always wanted to be in Scouts, and so God answered my prayers, and here I am working with George, a great group of people and kids, and it's an awesome opportunity to be a part of Scouts.
How cool is that? And George, you were also, as a kid, you were in the Scouts, were you?
Oh, yeah. I think I joined when I was 8 years old. I can only tell you I'm above 60 right now.
Well, I wouldn't have known.
Thank
know,
you. Thank you. That
Thanks
was
for sharing that.
Thank you for the compliment.
But then you were also, you actually were very active. You actually were an explorer at one time, or how far did you go?
I went all the way. I went to Eagle Scout.
Eagle Scout,
I
yeah.
was part of the Order of the Arrow at the time. This is up until I was about 18 years old. And then I joined Scouting again about 4 years ago. I was looking to get involved here in Asheville. I said, my goodness, Scouting's here. Let's get back involved. And I did. And it's a totally different program today from my years.
And what's so cool about it, George, and I asked you to do this, but I think one of the reasons you joined Scouts was because you love that, you love the shirt and you love the tie and the whole bit.
Well, that's just the cover. I mean, the nuts and bolts of Scouting is getting out there, you're camping, you're learning skills, you're making tons of friends, tons of experiences, and these will last a lifetime. I mean, I have reunions from 1969 with my fellow Scouts. This is 2020. We are still getting together. And that was one of the reasons that prompted me to get back into Scouting, because it was such a positive thing for me as an inner city kid. I got to see the outdoors. So for us up in New York City, this was a huge opportunity.
And Itzayana, let me ask you, so what got you into Scouting? How did you get involved in it?
Well, I don't know, because, you know, there used to never be girls in Boy Scouts and stuff. So now that they decided to make a group with girls and boys, it's just like, it's cool because you get to make new friends with, you know, like all girls and boys, and it's pretty cool.
How many girls are in your group?
Like 4?
Oh, that's cool. So you're not the only one then?
Yeah.
So what? And so how many boys are there about, you know?
Maybe like 10.
Yeah,
10?
10.
So what was your reaction to being, do you like the fact that there are boys and girls in it?
Yes.
Okay. So now, in scouting, what got you interested in it? Do you remember?
Mm,
How'd you hear about it?
they come to my school and stuff. They come to other schools and then they talk about cool stuff, and then that's how it got me interested in stuff.
And you mentioned, Tay, if you could just move the mic a little bit closer to Itzayana, that would be great. So perfect, right about there, Itzayana, that would be great. So you mentioned cool stuff. Like, what's some of the cool stuff?
We go camping, and then we're about to go to a hike or something, and we just go camping, and then George Pappas sings a lot of songs, and we have fun and stuff.
Had you ever gone camping before?
Yes.
So when you go camping, so you actually have to be outside to do camping.
Mhm.
Is that? Do they teach you how to put like a tent up and doing all that kind of stuff?
When we go camping, we have like those little houses of wood, so we don't do the tents, but we do.
Give me something else you learned being in a scout. Something you learned.
When we began or stuff like that, he taught us how to do ties and stuff, and it's pretty cool because you
So
learn.
So you teachers are, you have both George and Tay, are you teachers?
Yes.
Okay, and are they good, we'll say in front of them, are they good teachers?
Yes.
Okay, great. You can tell me on the side the truth, but you like having them as teachers.
Yes.
Tay, your experience, you had never been a scout before. How do you learn, like, the stuff you needed to learn?
So it's a lot of learning on the go sometimes.
I would think so, yeah.
And George has been a great mentor as well, just coming in and really picking up the ball as well, teaching them how to put up tents in our scout meetings, teaching them how to cook, teaching them about their packs and how to be resourceful whenever we're in scouts. And so having also Mickey Coleman, who's also one of our other colleagues in the group, she's been a great resource as well. We have another one named Margaret Gilbert. She's been in scouts with her children for over 20, 30 years now. And so having these individuals who are experienced background with scouts and other individuals who are new like me, it's a nice mix. You know, we take a little bit traditional and we take some new contemporary and mix it too, and it works out well for our group.
So as a kid, you had never done any of this stuff?
No, I've never done scouts before.
So you had to learn a whole bunch of stuff?
Yes, and still learning to this day.
That must be really cool, though. So give me an example of something you learned.
So recently, I just learned, I was actually speaking with an old scout member a couple weeks ago who's probably over in his 60s. A scout is always prepared. A scout is always resourceful. And so one of my favorite parts about our scouts meeting is the scout oath and scout law, in which we start every meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. Scout oath and scout law talks about a scout being loyal, trustworthy, a scout is reverent, a scout, it's just all these great things, these characteristics that when you say them repeatedly over and over again with these kids every week, it really instills this sense of confidence and sense of resourcefulness and a sense of just being ready for the world. And that's what I love, is just seeing these kids just take that on and own it and memorize it for their own agency and autonomy.
Well, that must be helpful. You mentioned you're also in the school system.
Yes.
So I guess there's a lot of crossover in terms of what you do in scouting with the school system. Are you finding that?
The most crossover I've seen is actually seeing my scouts in the schools and, you know, giving them a high five or saying hello and just being able to see them in a different setting as well, and them see me in a different setting, I think is a really robust combination for them to see.
That's really kind of cool. And George, I'll ask you the same kind of question that you mentioned. You had been a scout as a kid, and then you came back into it 4 years ago. The great thing I would imagine is a lot of skills. You're now a lawyer, very, very fine lawyer. I guess some of the skills you picked up as a scout, you brought into being a lawyer?
Well, definitely. One of the first things I learned about was setting goals. And when I was a young scout, you know, the goal was to proceed through advancement to make Eagle Scout. That was a long journey from about 11 years old to, I guess, 14. And to keep your sights on that goal really taught me to stay disciplined, focused, and be in there for the long haul. So when I reached that goal, it really set a template up for me for the rest of my life to reach other goals throughout my whole career. So scouting was the first place where I really learned about goal reaching and setting targets and staying on course. It's a huge learning opportunity for me as a kid. And that's what we want to try to instill with the children here, that this advancement not only teaches them skills, but teaches them to set goals. But the most important thing, which we didn't have to worry about, unlike today. I mean, you see kids today, they're texting left and right. They're in front of a computer screen. Scouting still takes people away from that computer screen, puts them out into the real world, puts them into the outdoors, puts them in place with real people in front of them to make real friendships, not something just on the screen. And so this will be lifelong lasting for them, and that's the key.
Let me ask Itzayana in terms of, like, at this point in time, do you have a cell phone yet?
Yes.
You do? Okay, incredible. So you have a cell phone, you use it all the time. When you're at scouting, do they allow you to use your cell phone?
Well, I don't know, because I don't bring it, because, I want to pay attention to what they're saying, so, you can learn, and then you know what you have to do.
That's really cool. How about the other people, your other friends and people in scouting? Do they bring their cell phones?
I don't think so. No.
Oh, that is, so do you miss it when you don't have it?
No.
I mean, so you can actually get through a weekend without your
Yeah.
cell phone
Yes.
and survive. So
I
that's
won't die.
no, but that's really cool. I mean, do you think it's not only good for you, but do you think it's good for other boys and girls to be without a phone?
Yes.
Okay.
Because nowadays they're always on their phone and stuff, and they don't see what's outside in the real world.
Because I'm even surprised as a 10-year-old that when did you get your cell phone?
I think like last year or something.
Did you really? Tay, what's your thinking of that? Not only in terms of scouting, but even, I know it's a big controversy in the schools. The kids, like in your school, can they have their cell phones?
I'm at several different schools, and so
Right.
it ranges from elementary to high school. And so I definitely want to echo what George said about just a lot of students just spending a lot of screen time.
Right.
And so taking away from, that eye contact, those soft skills that really become useful when you're taking on a career, when you're taking on that adulting life. And so on the other end, I definitely see some of those students use it as a great resource as well, whether it be research utilization, whether it be communication utilization. There's a fine balance that has to be struck because you also want to take into account cell phones have a tendency, in my opinion, to take away sometimes that innocence, that naiveness a child has, and that's where I worry the most. And so it's definitely, I believe, up to the parents and guardians as well to really make sure they have that safe monitor on their children, what they're watching, how long they're watching, what's the screen time happening here and there. And so it's a hard balance to strike, and personally I don't have kids, and so thankfully I don't have to come across that yet. But I really love to engage students off the screen before we get on the screen.
Because even you're raising a good point. I think it's true with adults as well. And George and I have been with some people, and they spend their time, instead of having lunch with them or dinner, they spend their time on the phone, and it's kind of sad. So you encourage this in terms of the scouts. Do they have to check their phones or just tell them not to bring it? Or what's the story to make sure they don't use them?
Well, I believe it's kind of just picked up. It's an unknown rule now where the scouts just don't have their phones. We're always moving. We're always doing activities at scouts. And so to try and pick up your phone and utilize it for whatever, a text message or Snapchat, Instagram, it's nearly impossible because between our den groups, we're always doing something. We're always interactive. We're always being proactive. And so it's nearly impossible for them to have their cell phones out. If anything, I would say sometimes the parents have their cell phones out more than the kids.
Well, I was just going to ask George, as a parent or as leader or whatever, that must be a transition for you also, that, when you're at Scouts, just to be with them and not with the cell phone.
Absolutely. It's great to see them away from the technology for a while, for an hour each meeting. If they come away learning interaction with the other children, they learn skills, they learn activities, they participate in activities they otherwise wouldn't have had a chance to feel or experience. You can't do that on a screen. So what they learn in scouting will stick with them, and it'll teach them individual skills. They're learning so many things, but the key thing is they're having fun in the real world with their peers. Very important.
Well, let me ask that of Itzayana. So George mentioned you have fun. Do you have fun being in Scouts?
Yes, a
What-
lot.
What makes it fun?
Well, they're just really nice, and then we get to do a lot of fun things, like I already said.
Let me ask you, too, or maybe ask Tay and George. One of the things, too, which is kind of cool, I guess, is that you have them meet. They meet how often?
We meet every Monday night at St. James's Church in Hendersonville.
And then you also have weekend trips or activities?
We do. I mean, we have a Pinewood Derby coming up. The kids put together their own racing cars for the past 2-3 weeks. We have a Camp Out Parent Cub weekend in April where they'll spend an overnight at Camp Daniel Boone. Itzayana was at one of these last April. Tay was there. And that's where they experienced the campfires and the songs and the activities, and all during the outdoors. They're not indoors. So it's a combination of meetings and also activities outside of the church.
Itzayana, do you prefer being outdoors or indoors?
Both in the middle.
So when you're outdoors, so you're sleeping outside and or in these cabins or something. George also mentioned the derby thing. Have you been in that yet, or are you doing this for the first time now?
The race cars.
The race
yeah,
cars.
Oh, no, it's my second time.
Oh, second time?
Yeah.
So what is it? You made a race car?
Yeah. It's like wood, and then we can sand it out, and then we put the nails in the little tires, and then we just put it, and then we can color it. And then that day, we have like a little racetrack or something, and then we just race the cars and see who wins.
That must have been fun.
Yeah.
How'd your car do in the past, last year?
Good. I think I got like 3rd place.
Okay. And so these cars, they just race on the track, but people aren't in them. Is that correct? Or they
No,
are in them?
There's just little cars.
Oh, little cars. So is that something, too, I guess you're learning in Scout how to build those kinds of things?
Mhm.
Had you ever done that before?
Yeah, only once.
No, but I mean, before you joined Scouts, had you?
No.
So that's really cool. You're learning to do stuff that you didn't necessarily have skills on.
Yes.
And Tay, the same thing too. So you never had that skill, I guess, or never developed. Did you learn how to build now a car, or to help other people build a car?
Yes, it's a process. Like George says, it takes several weeks. We have planning stages, of course. Getting the cars colored, getting the cars properly weighed, getting the tires and the axles put on right, involving the kids, making sure they take ownership of the cars, involving the parents sometimes so they can also help out and feel a part of Scouts just as much as their children are. Having the church build the racetrack to put up for us in the space that we use, having the race, everything along those lines, and just making it to that day next week where we'll have our racetrack and we have a once a month end of the month party. So it's kind of like a hand-in-hand combo, just a great time to kind of recognize what's going on. We reward our badges, I want to say partnership, excuse me, sometimes I'm thinking in Spanish. And so, yeah, since our pack is bilingual, it's majority Latino, Hispanic kids. It is all majority Latino, Hispanic kids, too.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that, Tay, because that, again, I give you credit to the pack. I also give credit to George that this particular pack is mostly, they said, mostly Latino?
Uh-huh.
Okay, but it's not a requirement. You don't have to be Latino
Right.
to join,
Nope.
join the pack. But at meetings and stuff, talking English or Spanish?
Both.
Okay, so let me ask you, George, from a standpoint of you getting this off the ground and you running the pack, is that a challenge for you?
In this particular pack, it's a challenge, and it's a challenge that virtually no other Scout unit in this state probably has to deal with. We have a language issue, not with the children so much, the Scouts. In our communications with the parents, this is where Tay is crucial because he bridges that language barrier for us, and that helps us communicate to the parents. Otherwise, we would not be able to impart what we're doing at meetings. They would just become bystanders. Tay's ability to communicate with them brings them into the program to help, because as you know, the secret to success with these packs and these units is parents and their participation. If the parents don't participate, it's tough to run one of these units. So that's the unique challenge that we have had at the pack, and with Tay's involvement, it's become a huge success.
Because you don't speak Spanish for the most part, is that correct?
I speak Greek. Nobody speaks
So,
Greek.
wait. So, are you teaching them? Is that one of the skills now to become move up in the scouting?
No, they're teaching me. I'm picking up the language. As you know, I do immigration, so I spend a lot of time with the Latino community. I've learned a lot of Spanish since then, but Greek is not one of them.
Okay. But Tay, now the question is, Tay, and I want to put Itzayana on the spot too. Where I'll put Itzayana. Have you learned any Greek yet?
No, not yet.
Not yet. Have you had any? Has George eaten any Greek food yet?
No,
Okay. Well,
I
that's
don't
something.
think so. Maybe
What?
not.
We'll make sure we bring in some Greek food soon.
Okay. What's fair is fair. Or same thing too, Tay. Have you learned any Greek yet?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
yet.
Or that can be a skill. You'll get a badge or something in basic Greek. We'll talk about that, Tay. That's fascinating that you try to get the parents involved, and I think that's one of the successes of the troop. That you don't just want the kids let out. Like I'm very pleased we have even outside. We have Itzayana's mom is out there to be with you, and that's something you try to do. You get the parents involved.
Well, I definitely believe it takes the whole entire troop, from Mickey to Margaret to George, trying to interpret between the parents and the kids. Sometimes it's hard to get it all together, and so having that whole village behind you saying, hey, Tay, go ask this parent to help out, put the wheels on her. Hey, Tay, go get this parent and let's sign this health form. Let's get these things going. It takes a real village to keep everyone involved in the group. I definitely wouldn't be able to by myself. I appreciate George for telling me how instrumental I am for them in communication, but they're the background and they're the foundation in telling me what to interpret, what to communicate, because I haven't had such a long, extensive history in the scouting world. And so having them guide me and delegate tasks as well, too, has been super helpful without having to take something from the unknown and then throw it out to interpret or to help these parents with. So
Talk about that and the importance of then the parents or the family to get involved in scouting, as opposed to just too many organizations. You just drop off the kid and that's it. How important is it to get the parents involved?
Well, I believe it's it's super duper important. And what I love most about it is the fact that we have two different cultures that come together. You have a scouting culture, and then you have a Latino Hispanic culture coming together to create this new kind of phenomenon in scouting. It's like George has pointed out, probably one of the, if only the only one in the state. And so having these two cultures mesh together is just really amazing to see. It's something new, it's something vibrant, it's something young, it's something that's still got a lot of room to grow and will grow. Right now, I believe it's still a seed that we just planted, and it's still growing. And to see how fast it's grown over the past couple of years with George's helps, Mickey, Margaret, and everyone that's been involved, from our volunteers, Miss Carol, it's been amazing to see this all come together. So for me, I see it as a language aspect as well, being super duper important, but also just the meshing of these two cultures, the scout culture and family culture.
And Itzayana, I'll ask you the same kind of question. How do you like having your mom involved in this as well?
Yes.
Okay, how does she feel about it? We should have actually brought her in. You could have translated for her, but how does she feel about getting involved? Does she like helping out?
Yeah, because she has friends there too.
Okay,
And then-
so her friends are involved in this is also. Now, so when your mom's involved, you're helping with the interpretation or the translation?
Sometimes, because
Okay.
sometimes we're in another group, and then with George, and then he's with them, and then he translates.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So, and you're pretty cool because you speak both Spanish and English. Is that correct?
Yes.
I have to give you a compliment. I bet your English is a lot better than my Spanish. Okay. I speak very little Spanish, but your English is like really good.
Thank
Is
you.
your Spanish good also?
Yeah. Like, yeah, I think so. Yeah.
It is.
I
It
hope so.
definitely is.
Okay. And is that, I guess, helping you in terms of grow, helping you both learn Spanish and English? Is that like when you have stuff that George is running, it's always in English? Is that correct?
Yeah.
And when Tay speaks, what does he speak in for the most part?
He speaks in Spanish and English, basically in the middle. So.
Okay. So I guess it's helpful to you to learn that you have hearing both languages at the same time too. So that's I think something else, Tay, and we could talk a little bit about that makes your pack so unique. That's kind of helpful, I guess, to people learning both Spanish and English, to have both languages spoken.
So in the school systems, we call it biliteracy.
Right.
And valuing that culture, that language in the school systems and outside spaces, but also in addition to learning, still learning English and developing those skills is super awesome, and it's super developmental for their brain development. You know, I'm sure in the past, George might be able to elaborate a little bit more, but just development in your brain intellectually moving forward in the world, knowing two languages, being trilingual, bilingual is super impactful, and it's super helpful for the workforce and just the community in general. And so having that biliteracy element, sometimes writing in Spanish, sometimes speaking in English, and a combination of everything, I think it's super robust for everybody in our group, whether you're English or Spanish speaker.
And I think George is a really good example because, of course, he has English and Greek, but then now picking up a little bit of Spanish. Any other languages?
No, not here. Mostly the Spanish is what I'm picking up.
Okay. And are you finding you're picking it up?
I pick it up. I'm so pressed for time between scouts, the practice of law, research that I do, my family responsibilities, supporting my wife. I mean, it's a miracle that I'm getting done what I'm done. But you know what? Some people say the folks that are most busy tend to get the things done. So time management's a real challenge in my life, but I've carved out a specific amount of time for scouting. It's very important for me and the children to do it, so I've made a commitment to do that. And so, but taking extra lessons to learn Spanish I tried it at AB Tech, and it just didn't work. I couldn't do the homework. That was the problem. I had no time.
Well, Tay, so when George is not around, do you still have meetings, or do you still have the regular Monday meetings?
The only time we usually don't have meetings is when the school systems are closed. We follow the school system schedule for the most part, the traditional school calendar.
Okay. And so, same thing with you, too. This, I imagine, keeps you pretty busy because, again, aside from the schoolwork, you have this work. I assume you have other things you're involved
Yes.
in, too. So I guess one of the things, as a scout, I don't know if it's a specific skill, but it does teach you and the students as well time management?
Yes.
Okay. Is that something, I guess, a lot of people don't have that talent or skill, they have to develop it?
Yes, I believe it's a lifelong developing skill, just to making sure you carve out time for things you want to do, for things that not only help you, but give you that intrinsic feeling of helping others. And so I believe Scouts has definitely allowed me, from the times we've created Google Calendars and Google Docs to using scoutbook.org recently. It's definitely been adjustments constantly.
And how about that in terms of communicating that to the students? George had mentioned a great example earlier. He said that helps you plan, or develop life goals. Is that something you work with the Scouts?
Yes, we work, whether it be like career, whether it be just learning on how to carry like pocket knife skills, how to be safety, whether it be health, whether it be cooking skills. All the skills we teach, I believe, are lifelong skills that can be used.
Let me ask Itzayana then, in terms of some of the skills you've learned, is there anything you can remember, say, in the last year that you learned that you never knew before as a Scout? Like the pocket knife. Is that something you have to have as a Scout? You have to have a pocket knife?
You don't have to. It's a skill we work towards on how to have a pocket knife.
Do you have a pocket knife?
No.
Not yet. Okay, she'll eventually
Not
develop that skill. Anything, can you remember that you learned in Scouting? That anything you didn't know before, maybe? You learned in school? Putting together a race car, you mentioned
Yeah.
a little bit. Cooking, did you cook?
Yeah, with my mom and stuff. Before.
Do you cook in Scouts also?
Well, I wasn't here that day, but they said that they did cook.
Oh, what was the day? What did they learn to cook that day?
It was the day we tripped the fire alarm in Hendersonville.
Did you? What happened?
I was teaching the kids how to cook a hamburger over a 2-grill stove and didn't realize how sensitive the fire alarm was in the church kitchen. You would think in a kitchen you can cook. Next thing I know, we have a 2-alarm fire deployment in the church. And this is all while I'm teaching cooking to the children.
Did the fire trucks come?
They sure did.
Oh.
We had smoke.
So I guess, Tay, what we learned from this is to not have George cook again. That'll be his one time and only time that he's teaching. There's a funny story.
I believe one of the best parts is George kept on cooking like nothing ever happened.
And wait, now here, so you missed that.
Yeah.
Oh, bummer.
I was sick that day. So.
Well, maybe it was a good time to be sick that day. But now the question is, Tay, so after you continued cooking, did you have to eat it afterward?
Yeah, the kids loved it. They had their hamburger, they had their hot dogs, they had their bread, they had their fruit, they had their vegetables, all key components to cooking. And they had to learn what food groups to use, so we used all those food groups.
But no souvlaki?
No souvlaki, opa, no souvlaki.
Okay. Well, that's something you want to bring Tay into, or we'll have another skill. So have you ever had Greek food?
No, I haven't.
Okay, well, George, here's your opportunity. Or for wouldn't that be fun? The multicultural opportunity.
I guarantee they will have Greek food.
Okay.
Now that I realize they haven't, they'll definitely have it.
Okay, so something to look forward to. Talk a little bit about, in the remaining time, some of the upcoming things that's going to be happening with the troop. Tay, anything, you mentioned the races
Right.
are going to be coming on.
So
What else?
On the 24th, we have our Pinewood Derby that was mentioned. We're planning a tentative hiking trip for March, and then we have our Cubs Parents Weekend, which is in April 18th, 19th at Camp Daniel Boone, like George mentioned.
Where's Camp Daniel Boone?
It's about 45 minutes away.
It's about 45 minutes away in just below Canton, North Carolina. It's about 45 minutes from Asheville.
Okay. That'll be probably an exciting thing.
Yes, it's one of probably the most favorite opportunities for the kids when we go. And then this summer, we're planning several different trips as well, too, just to get the kids more involved. Like we said before, we're still a relatively young pack, and so it's always just constantly adjusting, innovating, coming up with new ideas and new ways to keep the kids involved. And so we're excited to start some new activities as well as this year.
And what's nice about it, and I'll ask Itzayana as a final question, but in terms of George and Tay mentioned getting the kids involved, the parents involved. Do you like doing things, if you had a choice to do it with just the other kids or the parents, do you like getting the parents involved?
Yeah.
Is it really? Okay, you don't have enough of them, you kind of enjoy having them with you?
Yeah.
And how about having them sleep outdoors or sleep, in sleeping bags, I guess, they have to use? Do you like sleeping in a sleeping bag?
Yeah, kind of. I guess.
Sleeping bag or your bed, what would you prefer?
Bed.
Okay. All right, then. I want to ask Tay and George, but we'll ask you guys as a final question. If people want to get more information about getting involved in this super troop in Hendersonville, best bet is to do what?
Well, the best way to reach us would be through the Daniel Boone Council website at danielboonecouncil.com. And from there, they can find our contact information, or they can speak to someone at the head office, and they'll direct them to the unit. If they don't live near the Hendersonville Pack and they live in Asheville, there's many units right here in Buncombe County. It's not just Hendersonville. So the best place to go to would be the Daniel Boone Council website.
Okay, and I really like, thank you. This is kind of cool that I learned a little bit about scouting, and look forward to hearing about some other good things you're going to be doing in the future. And I'd like to thank Itzayana very much for being a guest, Tay and George as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll have you back again.
Thanks for having us, Blaine. We enjoyed it. Thank
Okay,
you.
George, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you very much. And as you guys work your way out, I'll kind of make a couple announcements, then I'll bring in my second guest. But first of all, I should mention that support for this show and WPVM is underwritten by the Grail Movie House, Asheville's Itzayana wants to take the headset with her. Alternative Cinema.
really?
The Grail Movie House is an independent, locally owned three-screen cinema located downtown Asheville. For current features, visit the Grail website at grailmoviehouse.com or the Grail's social media pages. As the next guest works her way into the studio, let me just mention two upcoming activities in the Asheville area. And the first is AVL Pechakucha Night. I finally can pronounce that after all these years. And that's just a really cool event. It's going to be happening on February 20th at 7 p.m. at the Grove House. And if you've never been to a Pechakucha Night, you should check it out. Have you been to one of those,
I've
Meredith?
not.
Okay, we'll have to invite you to one of those, but information on that is at www.universe.com. Pechakucha, real fun evening. In addition, I'll encourage people to see The Fantastics at Asheville Community Theater. I had the pleasure of seeing it last weekend. It's an absolutely fantastic show. It runs until March the 1st, I think it is, yeah. And information on that can be found at ashevilletheater.org, theater spelled correctly, with an R-E. That's a whole debate on how do you spell it correctly. It's next my pleasure to introduce somebody I've had tried to get on the show for a while, but I'm glad you made it today. And she is Meredith Switzer.
Schweitzer.
Schweitzer,
Yes.
I'm sorry. That's what I checked. And Meredith is Homeward Bound of Western North Carolina's executive director. And Meredith, you can wave to all your fans and friends in Facebook world, okay, who are watching the show. And welcome aboard.
Great. Thank you so much for having me and giving me the opportunity to share the mission and the work that we do here in Western North Carolina to end homelessness.
Well, I'm really glad you're on board because I guess I met you, we were talking off the air, I don't know, about 30 or 40 years ago. Was it when we first
A
met?
little less than that, but yes.
Okay, well, when we were way back when. But
Previous lives.
I met Meredith through Leadership Asheville, and she's a graduate of Leadership Asheville 23, also just recently a graduate of Leadership North Carolina. She's also Homeward Bound's executive director. And let's just right into this whole idea of being involved in Homeward Bound, I guess working with nonprofits in general. And you grew up where?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. I grew up in a lot of different places. My father was in the Air Force, and so I lived in Germany and Michigan and Thailand and Mississippi, and I was born in Texas, lived in Illinois. At age 11, my father retired to his hometown of Yanceyville, North Carolina, and that is where I attended middle and high school, and then went to UNC Chapel Hill for my undergraduate work, and then went to graduate school after that at Texas A&M to study educational psychology.
Well, that must have been a shift for you then. So your first 11 years, you're moving around, and finally you had roots. So you were never
Right.
homeless, is that correct?
Absolutely. I was never homeless.
Well, let's talk a little bit about when you were a girl growing up then, 11 years old or younger. Did you always know you wanted to be in the nonprofit, being an executive director of a nonprofit? Was that your goal as a little kid?
Actually, when I was younger, I always had this draw and this pull to work at in community with others and to help, to serve in some type of helping role. When I was thinking specifically about a profession, I thought I wanted to become a broadcaster. And I actually studied broadcasting and mass communications when I was at Carolina, and did some radio work myself, and also did some work in television, did an internship at MTV in New York City, worked at WTVD in Durham, North Carolina, did that for a number of years, and thought, again, that was the path that I would take, because I felt like that was the way I would be able to give back to my community. And really fell into education, actually, when I was in graduate school or living in Texas, and then realized that I loved the direct contact with others, and specifically young children and families. And so that's really what started my work in actively being a part of helping others, and then found my way into nonprofit work when I came to Asheville. And I actually started with Junior Achievement as the program manager there. That my paid job in nonprofit. I'd worked as a volunteer for a variety of nonprofits prior to that, but my first paying job was with Junior Achievement.
Well, it's so exciting based on what you just said, too. You mentioned you had a broadcasting radio background.
Right.
But I'm saying this is the first time you've been on Facebook Live.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so that's the first. Great. And so you've been in nonprofits, and then somehow you got involved in Homeward Bound. How'd you get to Homeward Bound?
I did. Well, Asheville's a very small city, and because of my work with previous nonprofits, I had a lot of relationships with folks who were also working in nonprofit, and the organization reached out to me. They knew that I had been, at the time they reached out to me, Homeward Bound reached out to me, I had been doing nonprofit consulting work with a variety of organizations in this community, and their need was for an interim executive director. So that was the premise, that I was going to come in for a few months while they were in a period of transition within the organization. They were seeking a full-time permanent executive director, and I was just going to be that temporary person. And
When you came on board, was that you thinking you were just going to be there for a while?
absolutely.
You know, it reminds me of, we were talking off the air about Brother Wolf and in general, where they had people foster. You know, we were guilty of the same thing too. You foster a cat and it became our permanent cat, you know.
Right.
So it's funny, you were an interim, but you weren't really thinking of becoming a permanent one, but it just kind of grew on you.
It did, and I became so involved in the work and with the staff and the board, and really loved what this organization was doing to help ease suffering and quite honestly saving lives through housing, and realized that it would be really hard to walk away, to step back from that. And certainly it was a decision that the board of directors made and the organization made. They needed to realize, or I guess find out if I would be the best fit. And so we talked about that for a while, and then in April, I became the permanent executive director.
You know, as I told you off the air, if ever there was a perfect position for you, this would seem to be the perfect, you know, it's just kind of you wait, things work out, but this is almost like a job description written for you, it would seem
thank
like. You know, you bring all your skills and put it into one thing as overall. Now, let's talk specifically about Homeward Bound then. So a lot of people know about it, but not a lot about it, including, I guess, yours truly. So what's Homeward Bound all about?
Well, I'd love to share how we started,
Please.
and then lead up to where we are today. We started in 1987 as Hospitality House. It was born.
This was in Asheville?
Yes, and this mission was born out of a need to provide sheltering services for those experiencing homelessness. And as often is the case, the faith community came together, various faith partners, to create this sheltering option for families and children. And it was meeting a need, but over time, we recognized as an agency that we needed to be more engaged in the work of getting people into housing and not just managing their homelessness, but actually ending their homelessness. And in 2006, we began implementing the Housing First model, which is actually the national best practice to end homelessness, because we believe that to end homelessness, you need to place people into housing. That's just how it works. There are a lot of things that happen in conjunction with that and support that transition into housing. But again, people need to be housed to end homelessness. And so the Housing First model is exactly the way it sounds. We place people into housing first, and then we provide support services, wraparound services to keep them there, because obviously getting into housing is important, but then staying in housing is really important. We want them to sustain their housing successfully, and it really depends on each individual. For example, someone may need intensive medical support. They may need help with their budgeting. They may need access to mental health services. So we can provide all of that. We call that our case management services.
In Asheville, how big a problem is homelessness?
Wow. Well, I can tell you it's a very complex issue, as it is for every community addressing it and working with those experiencing homelessness. I can tell you that what we call our point in time count, which is an annual, really a head count of those experiencing homelessness, last year was 580 individuals here in Asheville. And we just recently went through that process again, where there was a point in time count. It was on January 29th. We don't have that report yet. We anticipate the number will be very close as well. what I can tell you is that really takes the community to address this issue effectively. It takes a lot of education and a lot of financial resources to really get people where they need to be, but I can guarantee you that it is much more affordable to address the issue than to not address the issue, because the truth is that because of accessing emergency care, engaging in local services like law enforcement and fire and all of those public services that end up coming together to address the issue on an emergency basis ends up being so much more expensive than actually housing people. And not only is it less expensive to house people, it's the right thing to do. And we believe wholeheartedly that everyone deserves a place to live, a safe and affordable place to live.
What causes homelessness?
What causes homelessness? That's a great question. It depends on the individual. I think there are a lot of stereotypes about how people arrive at homelessness. We recognize that it looks different for every person. There may be commonalities. For example, there may be histories of substance abuse within the family. Maybe someone grew up, for example, with parents who were substance users, or maybe there was domestic violence. Maybe there was abject poverty. It's hard to break out of the cycle of poverty. I believe that we are so impacted by our early experiences, and so we find that a lot of times people that we work with who experience homelessness have experienced that for a very long time, and oftentimes were born into situations that really created that for them. Sometimes it's a matter of having an emergency or some type of crisis in your life, whether it be a job loss or an extreme medical emergency, and you don't have the right support around you to move through it. For example, I've had a number of extreme situations throughout my life. I've had some traditional experiences that were difficult to manage, but I always had a safety net. I had family members, I had friends, I had a church community that was incredibly supportive during those times of crisis for me, and I was able to move through them successfully. Not everyone has that. And so when you don't have those elements in place, it's really difficult to, as the old adage says, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. If you don't have the necessary safety net in place, it's very difficult.
And you're raising a good point, I think, about the fact that I guess one of the things you have to work with folks is how do you develop that community, or how do you get other people to help you so you don't get back into the situation
Right.
if you get them out. So you mentioned, for example, churches or other groups, and they're all here to help, but you have to reach out to them at times, I guess.
Right. Well, yes, and sometimes there may be a situation where you don't even know what resources are out there for you. And sometimes mental health challenges can prevent you from accessing those. You may, for example, if you have a persistent and severe mental illness, you may not be comfortable reaching out to a traditional service. For example, we have our A Hope Day Center, which is really what we consider to be our first door to housing and first door to, that front door to services. But if you are someone who's struggling with mental illness, you may not feel comfortable coming into a large day center where there are a lot of people and there's a lot of activity. It may be overwhelming. And so one thing that we feel is really important is recognizing that one method is not going to work for everyone. And so we feel like the responsibility for us at Homeward Bound is to provide services in a variety of ways. So if people don't feel comfortable coming to the A Hope Day Center, for example, we can go out and meet them where they are. We have community outreach programming. We have 2 staff members who are really good at what they do and know how to go out and find people where they are, where they may be in crisis, and providing them support and access to services, literally walking with them, moving with them through those channels, because they may not know that they can access things in a traditional way or may not be comfortable doing that.
Well, talk about that, Meredith, because that's something maybe you can teach me a little bit about. That if I come across somebody who is homeless, or I guess a visual test is one way to usually find out. If you see somebody sleeping on the street, okay, that's, I guess, a pretty good indication that they may be homeless. Is that probably?
That could be a good indication, sure.
I mean, or you see them. What should people do if they come across this? Call you or speak to the person directly?
I think it really depends on the situation. What we often hear in the work that we do at Homeward Bound is that people who experience homelessness feel like they're not seen. Oftentimes people will avert their eyes. Oftentimes they'll say derogatory things to them. We've actually had people tell us that they've had bottles thrown at them from car windows when they're walking with all their belongings. They'll make fun of them. But oftentimes what it is that they just say, I feel like I'm not seen. You know, there's this bustling, wonderful city around me and it's vibrant and we have these wonderful restaurants and businesses, and yet we have people sleeping on benches and under shrubbery and things like that. And so it's as if there are two different worlds here in Asheville. And so one thing that I would really encourage citizens and residents and tourists even downtown in Asheville or anywhere they see someone who may be struggling is to smile at them. If it looks like they're in a place for conversation, that may be appropriate as well. And we oftentimes, or actually, the overarching message is that what we want to do is get people connected to services. So business owners, residents downtown who have the opportunity can call us at Homeward Bound. We do, again, we have 2 community outreach folks. Actually, more than that, we also have what's called a path team that goes out and finds people who need support. And what I want to stress too is that we don't require people to access support. We offer that in a way that we hope is comfortable and safe for them. We want to encourage them to access services, but that's certainly not something that we want to push on anyone. But we certainly want to provide support as they are comfortable with that.
So if I come across somebody who's homeless,
Yes.
tell me what I should do. In other words, what's kind of interesting as you talk about it is that oftentimes when I see homeless folks, or obviously homeless folks, they're not even asking for money. You know,
Right.
it seems they're almost like 2 groups of people. There are some people who are asking for money, may need money, but homeless people just, and I'm guilty of it, as you said, I just kind of ignore them. You see them, but you don't do anything about it.
Sure.
What should people do?
Sure. I would encourage them to call Homeward Bound. Oftentimes, we can send out our community outreach case managers to come and have a conversation with them to see if they need anything. If it's a medical crisis, I mean, if someone is, you know, if they're bleeding or they are in obvious mental health crisis or any type of medical crisis, then the most appropriate thing might be to call 911. That's certainly an option. But the most important thing is trying to access resources for them. Obviously, it's not safe to sleep on the sidewalk or to be exposed outside if it's, you know, freezing temperatures. So we certainly want to make sure that they can access the services that they need. So again, I would encourage folks to call Homeward Bound. They can also go to our website. It's homewardboundwnc.org, and there is a wealth of information there on how to reach out to the staff.
Talk about something that you folks have moved into also, the fact that just getting off the streets, but you're also, as you told me off there, trying to get them into affordable housing.
Yes.
Okay. And I guess, is that the goal to, I guess, transition people along the
That's always our goal. Our goal is always to get people housed, and that's really how we distinguish ourselves from other work in the community. There are a lot of great organizations working within this space in terms of helping to address the needs of those experiencing homelessness. How we feel we are incredibly different is through the Housing First model, which identifies housing placement as the most critical need and the most important, and that's what you do first. Your goal is always to get people into housing and then to provide the support wraparound services that I was mentioning earlier.
and when you mention getting into housing, we're talking housing that's not just going to be temporary. It's
Yes, it's permanent.
Right.
Our goal is to always get people into permanent housing, and it can look a couple different ways. We have permanent supportive housing, which is the way that we provide support for those who aren't going to be very successful living independently without any type of support. We actually have a community. It's called the Woodfin. It's located downtown on Woodfin Street, and we have 18 clients who are housed there. We have 24-hour security, case management on site. That is a setting that is most appropriate for individuals who, because of a disability, need to have that closer support, that more, I guess, constant support, if you will. And there are others who can live in what's called a scattered site placement, where that's just somewhere in the community. It may be in someone's garage apartment. It may be an apartment building in West Asheville. They can live more independently and don't need that type of really close supervision, or rather support. And so it looks different for each person, but what we really pride ourselves on is knowing our clients well. And they each have a case manager when they first come into the organization. They get linked with services, and then we assess their needs in terms of housing placement and the services that they need beyond that.
That must be exciting for you in terms of the organization. We'll call them the success stories, and you were
Right.
telling me again off the air some pretty exciting success stories to the extent that one is even a member of your board.
Yes, we have a member of our board who, what we call, has lived experience. She has experienced homelessness and has become a great advocate for us. And she frequently tells her story because she really credits Homeward Bound with saving her life, and allowing her to really be at this place in her life. And uh, maybe at a later date she can come and join us
We mentioned
on
that. I
this
mean,
show.
just a great story. But you have a bunch of those stories, though. Is that correct?
We
That you-
do. We have a number of those stories, and success looks different for each person. Success for a client may be that they've been housed for the last 5 years, and previously they were homeless for 10 years. It could be that their mental health has started to stabilize and they are happier and healthier. It may be that they are in housing and their diabetes is managed, and that wasn't possible when they were living outside unsheltered. So again, success looks different for each person, and success for me may be different than what it may be for someone that we are serving. So again, we really try to make it really specific to the individual in terms of what that's going to look like. And I mentioned earlier that we want support services to be voluntary. And that's really important. We engage with people who have a variety of needs, and we make sure that they know we are there to support them. We are not there to make decisions for them. I think that's really important as well.
And as you indicated, this is certainly a complex issue. In other
Yes.
words, looking at it from afar, it'd be cool if you could just push one button and take care of, it right away. But there are many other factors come into play that to get somebody who's homeless and to have them not become homeless.
Right.
You
There are
know.
a lot of factors at play. I can tell you one of the biggest challenges for us as an organization is the lack of affordable housing. That's one thing that we are working really hard to advocate for in terms of creating more opportunities and more housing stock for individuals who are lower income and desperately need affordable housing in order to be housed. And one very exciting project that we have right now is called Key Commons. We actually purchased our own housing complex. We have 11 units that we are renovating right now. We actually purchased them in the latter part of October of 2019, and we are in the process of renovating them and getting them ready for folks to move in. We do have some individuals who are already living on property, but that's an exciting time for our organization. We have great landlord relationships with a lot of private landlords, roughly 70 to 90, who provide housing for us and for our clients. But we recognized if we wanted to be more in the driver's seat and have more control over the availability of affordable housing, as well as the cost of affordable housing and not having those rents go up every year, that we really needed to become owners ourselves. And we believe it's really going to change the way that we are able to identify affordable housing and place people in affordable housing and keep them there.
Because a cool thing in that affordable housing is, in general, not only for the homeless, but for everybody in Asheville. To have the
Absolutely.
affordable housing. And folks don't, I think folks now realize it, but especially given the fact that we have so many people working in Asheville, and they work, but they can't find a place to live, and so that's a real problem. So I love the model of having your own housing.
Yes.
When will that be available?
Well, that particular project is active right now. We currently have people who live at Key Commons, that development that I just talked about, And as we continue to renovate the units, we will move people in. And so we hope to have that done within the next, hopefully no later than the next 6 months. And again, we're going to continue to move people in as units are available. Our goal is to purchase more of those types of apartment complexes. And we also have on the horizon an 80-unit permanent supportive housing complex, which will have 24-hour security, on-site case management, hopefully on-site medical services to some degree. And we think that's going to be a game changer for us. Not just Homeward Bound, but for this entire community. We can house 80 individuals. If we can house 80 individuals in one facility where all of these amazing support services are available, and get these people from outside where they are really struggling and quite frankly at risk for dying outside, it is going to change the way that our, not only the way that we are able to serve individuals, but to ease suffering and to change the landscape of Asheville.
You have, I think you told me, about 60 employees.
We
Let's
have
count.
roughly 60 full-time staff members.
Okay. And so what are some of the other programs they're involved in? So a lot of the affordable housing, getting off the street, very impressed. You have the two people driving around and working. What are some other things you guys do?
Well, we actually have a donation center. So we've talked a lot about the importance of getting people into housing, but obviously you and I both know when you move into a new place, you need things to live there and you want to be comfortable and safe in your own home. And so we have a donation center called the Welcome Home Donation Center. It's located in Woodfin. And if you go to our website, you can find out how to donate items, but we take gently used items, couches, lamps, furnishings. We like to take towels and soap and all the things that you would need, pots and pans and linens, things that you would need when you move into your own place. And we find, especially in Asheville, there are a lot of people who have opportunities to have second homes or rental properties or whatever that may look like, and they find that they have a need to donate items. And so we're a great place to accept those. We would love to take donations that can be used for someone to have their own home.
Let's talk about other ways members of the community can get involved. So you mentioned way back when you were volunteer and a whole bunch of different things. Homeward Bound looks for members of the community to get involved?
Absolutely.
How so?
We love volunteers, first of all, and there are a lot of ways for volunteers to become engaged in our work. We have a volunteer coordinator who, his name is Joe Hoffman, and he is actually housed at the A Hope Day Center, and so he's a great person for them to connect with. If someone, for example, wants to reach out through our website and wants to take a tour of our day center, that's really the best way to get first connected to the work that we do. It's a great way to see for yourself the work that we're doing and to hear firsthand how we're impacting this work in this community. But they can come and volunteer at our A Hope Day Center. They can help give out mail. For example, those who experience homelessness can have their mail delivered to 19 North Ann Street. No other place provides that opportunity here. And of course, as you know, if you're homeless, you don't have an address. And so we can have volunteers give out mail. We can have them help make coffee. They can sit and have conversations with our clients. Oftentimes, folks just want to come to our day center for fellowship and community. We all have a sense of need a sense of belonging, and the A Hope Day Center can provide that.
Meredith, anybody wants to get in touch with the organization, either to be a volunteer or make a donation, a whole bunch of different kinds of ways to get involved, best bet is to do what?
I would say go to our website. It's homewardboundwnc.org. That is the best way to get connected to all of those things. If they want to donate financially, if they want to donate goods and services, that's the way to do it. Go to our website.
Anyway, I'd like to thank you, Meredith. We finally got to have you come on board for
Yes.
being my guest. Second half hour on the Blaine's World Show. Also thank my guests, George Pappas, Itzayana Gomez Axencio, and Tay Brown. First guest in the first half hour. Thank my producer, Amy Prisnash, and to Zuzu Welsh, who provided the music here at the beginning of the show and now here at the end. Hope to see you folks next week at the regular time. Thanks for listening.